My name is Linnea Ostergaard. I am 36. On the 4th of March, I came down to the sale barn in Gooding before the afternoon milking and found my cows already penned in the East Alley. 214 head, a paper tag stapled through every ear tag. The cows were mine. The names were mine. The mark burned on every hip in that alley was mine, recorded to one person when I was 19, and in this state, nobody else may burn it. My mother stood at the rail with the herd book under her arm. "You milked them," she said. "That is not the same." I put my gloves in my coat pocket. There was a piece of iron in my truck that morning. By 1 o'clock, it was lying on the auctioneer's desk, and that sale never reached Lot 1. Welcome back to Porch Stories, where a woman who was never handed the book finds out she has been signing her name for 17 years without a pen. The sale bill in my mailbox said $784,150, complete dispersal. The consignor line said R. Ostergaard. My name starts with an L. My sister Riva's starts with an R. Subscribe before I go on, because what stopped that sale fits in one hand, and a stranger had to read it out loud for it to count. And in the comments, one word from you. Are you the one who keeps the book in your family, or the one who gets up? I milk cows for a living. Let me take you back to the 2nd of February, to a mailbox at the end of a gravel lane, and a woman who has been getting up at 4 o'clock since she was 14. There is no version of this where I get to sleep in. A cow that gave milk yesterday has to be milked today. If she is not, she swells, and she gets sick, and that is not weather. That is something you did to her. I get up at 10 minutes of 4. I have a cup of coffee standing at the sink in the dark. Then I walk out across the yard in whatever the yard is doing that morning, and I turn on the lights in the parlor, and the barn wakes up. I was 14 the first time I did the whole thing by myself. My father had been dead 2 years. My mother had a migraine. My grandmother was in Twin Falls with a broken wrist and a cousin's telephone number. I came out at 4 o'clock in a barn coat that hung past my knees, turned the lights on, and could not remember how to start the wash cycle. 61 cows then. It took me until 9. I can tell you exactly what a 14-year-old feels, alone in a parlor in the dark with a herd to get through. I felt that nobody was coming, not in the sad way, in the other way, the one where you find out the floor holds. I have not missed a 4 o'clock since, except for 2 funerals and an appendix. The parlor smells like iodine and warm animal. Under it, there is the sweet green smell of silage. If you grew up here, that is the smell of money. The milk house next door smells like chlorine and cold steel. That is the smell of nothing having gone wrong yet. 214 head. I know all of them, not the way people are sentimental about animals. I mean, I can tell you which one kicks and which one will not walk past a puddle. Which one puts her head over the gate for you, and which one puts her head over the gate for the grain and does not care who is holding it. My grandmother taught me to name them out of the same book every year. The A year, then the B year. A cow named Balsam was a B. I bought Balsam with my own calf money when I was 20 and hauled her home in the back of my own truck, and she is the only animal on this place I can say that about. Her daughter Corva was a C. Corva's daughter Daffodil was a D. Daffodil had a bull calf and then a heifer, and that heifer is Everly. 1 truck, 1 girl's money, 4 generations. Everly is the far end of that line. Keep her. Here is a thing about cows that people do not know, and you are going to need it before we are done. They learn your hands before anybody teaches them your name. I stand at the north end of the barn and put 2 fingers in my mouth and whistle. 214 head, come up off the sand, turn, and walk toward me, not because they love me. Because for 17 years that noise has meant feed is coming and nothing bad is about to happen. It takes about 40 seconds. It sounds like a train going over a bridge. I have done it in front of exactly 4 people in my life, and every one of them cried, which I find embarrassing and have never once discouraged. Now let me show you the box, because it does not leave my hands tonight. An Army surplus ammunition box. olive green steel, the size of a bread pan, heavier than it looks, with a rubber gasket in the lid and a hasp that closes with your thumb. The handle is worn down to bright metal underneath. Somebody stenciled a number on the end of it in white a long time before I was born, and my grandmother painted over that and wrote 2 words instead. Milk house. That is what we call it, the milk house box. It sits on the second shelf over the wash sink, and it has sat there my whole life. You have to understand what a milk house does to paper. The floor is wet, the walls sweat. Twice a day, the wash cycle throws hot water and chlorine at the ceiling. A piece of paper in a room like that has about a week to live. It goes soft, then it goes gray, then the ink walks right off it. So the paper goes in the milk house box, and the milk house box goes on the shelf, and that is how a dairy remembers anything. What is actually in there is the only honest account of what came out of those cows. Every sheet of it was written by somebody who does not live on this farm and does not care whose feelings are involved. That is the part I want you to hold on to. Not the box. Who wrote what is in it? There is a girl who feeds my calves on Saturday mornings. She is 15 and she lives a mile down the road. She writes each calf's number on a strip of masking tape and sticks it on the bottle so she cannot mix them up, which is not something I taught her. The first Saturday she worked for me, she asked what was in the green box. I said paper. She said, "Why is paper in a box?" I said, "Because it is the only thing in this room that cannot be replaced." She has never asked again, and she has never once moved it. Now the iron. Every April, when the ground firms up enough to get a chute out to the corral, I brand the spring heifers. It takes a morning. It is loud, and it is not pretty, and I am not going to dress it up for you. The iron is hand-forged. My grandmother made it in 1962 out of a wagon rod and a piece of angle iron. The head of it is a shape you can draw in 3 strokes and cannot draw in 2. The bar is worn thin and bright in one spot about 4 inches from the head, where 3 women have held it. Her hand, my mother's hand, mine. The mark it makes is not decorative. It is not a family crest. It is a legal fact, and I am going to tell you the rule once, plainly, and then never explain it again. In this state, a brand is recorded to a person, not to a farm, not to a family, not to a herd. One name, one mark, filed in a book at the state office in Boise and renewed on a schedule. And nobody else on earth is allowed to burn it into an animal. I found out what that actually means in a gravel yard when I was 22. I had 6 old cows on a trailer behind my pickup, going off the place because they were done, and I was in a hurry. You are always in a hurry when you have to be back for the afternoon milking. A woman in a canvas coat put her clipboard on my fender and walked the length of the trailer and looked at every hip. Then she came back around and asked me for my paper. I said the cows were ours. Everybody knows us. She said, out of the side of her mouth, the way a person says a thing she has said 9,000 times. "I do not decide who owns a cow, honey." I read the mark, and I read the certificate. And if the 2 of them do not agree, nothing leaves this yard. I sat in my truck afterward with my hands on the wheel, feeling stupid, then feeling something else. I did not have a word for it until much later. Somebody had written it down, and the writing outranked everybody standing there. I did not get her name that day. Hold on to her anyway. My grandmother is named Linnea Ostergaard. She is 91. She lives in the little house at the top of the lane, 80 yards from my kitchen door. She put this ground together one piece at a time, starting in 1954. That is a sentence I can say in 4 seconds and she can say in 9 hours. Golda drove me to the courthouse the week I turned 19. She stood behind me while I filled out the form and paid the fee out of my own calf money. Then she went home and cooked supper for a woman who did not find out about it for 2 years. That woman is my mother. My mother is Marlis Ostergaard, and for 30 years she has kept the herd book. The herd book matters, so look at it with me. A green cloth ledger the size of a phone book on the kitchen counter at the big house. Which cow, which sire, which date, which calf. Sold, died. Kept. My mother has beautiful handwriting and she writes in it every night the way other people watch the news. She also handles the co-op paperwork. The meeting notices, the ballots, the checks that get carried to the bank in Buell. She has done that since before I could reach the tank. I told her the numbers at supper and she wrote them down. That is how it worked for 17 years, and it never once occurred to me that it was a system. It was just the shape of the evening. Somebody keeps the book. Somebody does the milking. The book was hers. The milking was mine. For that milking, I was paid $1,000 a month. My mother called it a draw. She said it in the voice you use for a word you are hoping nobody looks up. There was no lease. There was no partnership agreement. There was no page anywhere with 2 signatures on it that said what I was. I did not ask for one. I want that on the record before anybody else says it about me. A grown woman running 214 head of somebody's cows on somebody's ground for $12,000 a year, and I did not ask. Asking would have been a way of saying out loud that I thought it might go badly, and I did not think it would go badly. I have a sister. My sister, Linnea Ostergaard, is 3 years younger, sells houses in Boise, comes out at Christmas and takes a picture of the calves, and is warm to me on the phone. Linnea has not carried a bucket since she was 17 and has never pretended otherwise. I mean, to be fair to her, a lot of this is not hers. And there is Sylvester, the hauler who has pulled our bulk tank 3 mornings a week since I was in high school. He comes in at 5:40 with his hat still on. He dips his sample. He reads the number off the tank. He writes the weight down, and he writes my number under it. Every member of the co-op has a number. Mine is the one the milk goes out under and the check comes back to. And from here on, I am going to call it my number. Then he leaves the yellow carbon of the ticket under the same magnet on the milk house door, every time, for 20 years. Then he says the same 6 words on his way out. Nice night for it, wasn't it? It is never a nice night. He is being funny. It has taken me 2 decades to stop feeling like I have to laugh. Golda's help comes Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, from 9 until 2. A woman drives out from Wendell and gets her up and gets her fed and gets her walking. That is $240 a week. It comes out of the milk check the way the propane does, and the vet, nobody ever wrote that down either. It was just what the milk paid for. And that, I suppose, is the fair way to describe my life in the last week of February. 214 head. 1 green ledger on a counter I did not own. 1 steel box on a shelf I did not think about. And $1,000 a month that I had somehow decided was a wage instead of an insult. A brand does not argue. It only answers whose. Before I take you to the mailbox, do me one favor. Name the thing in your family that everybody agrees is yours and nobody ever put in writing. Then stay with me. Because in 9 days, a woman I have known my whole life is going to hand me a piece of paper across a counter. And the only thing wrong with it is going to be 1 letter. The 2nd of February was a Monday, and the mail comes about 10:30. I had a heifer due and a compressor acting up. I went down the lane with the heater on, 1 setting away from broken. I pulled the mail out with my gloves still on. On top of the stack was a folded flyer on green paper from the sale barn in Gooding. They send those to everybody. I have gotten one every month of my life. You look at them the way you look at a weather map to see who is going out of business this spring. Complete herd dispersal, 214 head. Cows, bred heifers, and calves. Tuesday the 4th of March, Ring Gate 3, 1 o'clock. Consignor, R. Ostergaard. I want to tell you that I understood it right away. I did not. I sat at the end of my own lane with the engine running and read that flyer 3 times, looking for the other Ostergaard. There are Ostergaards all over this valley, and half of them are cousins. A person can talk herself into anything for about 90 seconds. Then I got to the bottom of the green sheet and read the line under the sale terms. Herd on test, records available, same location since 1954. On test means somebody from the outside drives in every month and writes down what every single cow gave that morning. You put it on a sale bill because it is worth money to a buyer. There is one dairy in this valley that has been in the same yard since 1954. My ears went hot. That is the honest report of what my body did. Not my heart, not my stomach. My ears got hot inside the collar of my coat, the way they do in church when somebody says your name from the front. I drove up to the big house. My mother was at the counter with the green ledger open in front of her and her reading glasses on and the radio going. I put the flyer on the counter next to the book. She looked at it. She did not pick it up, and she did not put the pen down. Well, she said, you were going to hear about it sooner or later. I asked her whose cows they were, and my mother took her glasses off. She does that when she wants you to see her eyes. Then she said the sentence I have now heard from 4 different people in 4 different rooms. You milked them. That is not the same. I said the heifers came out of animals I bought with my own calf money when I was 20. I said I have made every breeding decision on this place since I was 26. I said Everly's great-grandmother came home in the back of my truck. And my mother said, in a completely reasonable voice, the second thing. Nobody steals what was never in your name. I want you to notice that she was not shouting. My mother has never shouted at me. She says things like that at conversational volume with the radio on. Then she puts her glasses back on and goes back to the book. And you are left standing in a kitchen, deciding whether to be a person who makes a scene. I did not make a scene. I went and did the afternoon milking. There were 214 animals who did not know anything had happened. They were going to be at that gate at 4 o'clock, whether or not I was. My sister called that night from Boise. Riva was crying before I said one word, which is a thing she does. She said she did not ask for this. She said our mother told her it was tidier this way. She said she has a life and 2 children and does not want a dairy. I asked her whether she had signed anything. She said she signed a paper at the kitchen table at Christmas, with everybody standing around, and did not read it. Because it was Christmas. Then she said it. She said it kindly, in the voice you use on somebody in a hospital bed. But Linnea, she said, you milked them. That is not the same. That is only what Mom says. She did not know she had said it. That is the part I need you to hear. My sister repeated that sentence to me while she was crying about how unfair it all was, and she believed she was comforting me. Let me get the ground out of the way, because somebody is already typing it. The dirt is my mother's. Golda signed it over to her a long time ago and kept the little house for as long as she lives. I have never argued about the dirt one time in my life. The barns are hers. The parlor is hers. I have not got a claim on a fence post, and I never said I did. The cows are a different animal, and I mean that literally. 9 days later, I drove down to Gooding and went into the sale barn office, and that is where this turns. The office at that barn is a plywood room behind the scale, with a space heater and a window into the alley. The woman who runs it is Griselda Underhill. She has been taking consignments there since before I could drive, and she once kept a bottle calf of mine alive on her own porch for 3 weeks. Her husband cuts our back hayfield. She was glad to see me for about 4 seconds. Then she was not glad, because she looked at my face and understood that I did not know something she had assumed I knew. She got the file. She put it on the counter and turned it around so it faced me. I have thought about that a great deal since. She did not have to do it. The consignment agreement was 2 pages, 214 head, complete dispersal, commission and yardage, and a line for insurance. And in the middle of the first page, there is a box. The barn puts a number in it so everybody knows what is being carried and what the seller expects. Somebody had typed $784,150. The signature at the bottom was my mother's. The consignor's name typed above it was R. Ostergaard. 1 letter. My whole life came down to 1 letter, and it was the wrong one. Griselda Underhill put her finger on that line and asked me, straight out, whether I had been shipping milk out of that yard in my own name. I said I had, since I was 19. She said the barn requires proof of ownership before it will take a herd that size. My mother had brought a 2-page thing in. Griselda put it in the file and did not read it closely, because when Marlies Ostergaard hands you paperwork, you assume it is right. Everybody in this county has been assuming that for 30 years. Then she made me a copy. She did not ask anybody. She stood at that machine in her coat, with the lid coming down twice. Then she handed it to me warm and said, "If I am wrong about you, I will apologize in front of the whole barn. But you are the one I have been writing tickets to." I read it in the truck in the parking lot, with the heater running and the sun going down over the pens. It was a statement of dissolution of a partnership. The partnership had a name I had never heard, and two partners, my mother and my sister. It said the partnership was formed in 1998 and dissolved on the 5th of March last year. On dissolution, it said, everything went to the remaining partner: the seat at the co-op, the equipment, and the herd. The 5th of March last year. I am going to call that the week on her paper from here on, because nobody should have to keep 2 Marches straight in one story, and I am including myself. Attached to the back of it was a list: Balsam, Corva, Daffodil, Everly. 10 more names after that. Those are my names. I read every one of them into the green ledger at supper myself, out loud, while my mother's pen went across the page. It took me 2 days to understand what that list was, so let me save you the 2 days. A paper like that does not write out 214 animals. Nobody's does. You name the ones with papers on them, and then you write times and their increase, and that one phrase drags the whole rest of the herd along behind it. So those names are not a sample of the herd. On that page, those names times are times the herd. Knock them down and there is nothing left standing on it. And at the bottom, under a line that said, "Witness," was the signature of a man who has cut our back hayfield since I was in braids. I sat in that truck until the yard lights came on. Then I drove home and did the afternoon milking. At 6 o'clock, I went into the milk house and stood at the wash sink with my coat still on. I took the milk house box down off the second shelf, set it on the sink, and put my thumb on the hasp. My hands were shaking enough that the hasp took me 2 tries. I have never told anybody that. I am telling you because it is the truest sentence in this whole account. Here is what came out of the milk house box that night. I am going to go slow. The whole back half of this depends on you knowing who wrote each piece and where it came from. Not 1 page of it was written on this farm. The first thing on top was a stack of yellow carbons about 2 inches thick, held with a bulldog clip. Those are the pickup tickets. Every time Sylvester pulls the tank, he writes the weight off the stick and the temperature off the gauge. Then he tears off the yellow and leaves the white with the load. I got down on my knees on that wet floor and spread them out on a feed sack. Then I could not read them. The tube over the sink flickers, and my eyes were doing something. So I carried the box up the lane to my grandmother's kitchen, and Golda Ostergaard, who is 91, put her magnifying glass on the table and said, "Well, get the good lamp." We sat there until 1 in the morning. The next morning, I called Doc Thornbury. Her actual name is Gladys Thornbury. She is the large animal veterinarian for 4 counties, and nobody has called her anything but Doc in 30 years. She came out at 10 and did the herd check with her arm in a sleeve and her breath going up in the cold. While she worked, I asked her the question. She marked a cow's rump with a blue chalk stick in the middle of her own sentence, the way she does, and said it without looking up. When I dry a cow off, I sign a paper that says so, and I keep a copy and the state gets one. That cow gives nothing for 60 days. Not a little. Nothing. My calendar says which cows, and cows do not negotiate. Then she pulled her arm out and looked at me over the top of the chute. "Why?" she said. I gave her the schedule with the 14 names on it. Doc Thornbury read it, standing up in the corral with her sleeve still on. "That woman has pulled dead calves out of my animals at 2 in the morning. I watched her go a color I had never seen on her before." She said, 3 of these were 60 days dry that week. I signed the papers myself. And then she went down the list again with her chalk hand and said, "And these 11 were heifers." Remember that she said it out loud, standing in my corral. Hold on to that word for 2 minutes. A heifer is not a cow. She is a young female who has never calved. She gives no milk at all, not less milk, none, until the day she has her first calf. After that, she is a cow. That is not a rule somebody made up. That is the animal. 11 of the names on that list did not have a first calf until the summer after. The 3 that had were dry. So in the week on her paper, the week my mother wrote down as the day the herd changed hands, that herd gave nothing. Not a low day. Nothing. 14 names on a page and not one drop of milk standing behind them. And in that same week, the tank went out 3 times, and the check came to my number. I sat down on the step of the corral chute in the mud. Doc Thornbury did not say anything for a while. Then she said, "Do you want me to write it out?" I said yes. She got a legal pad out of her truck and wrote it and signed it and dated it, standing on my step with her chalk in her teeth. One thing has to be straight before you hear the rest, because it is the difference between this story and a story about a woman who is only angry. I did not go find those dates. They were already there, and they had been there the whole time, and they were put there by people who were not thinking about me. Once a month, a supervisor from the testing association drives into my yard at 4 a.m. with a crate of little bottles. She hangs a meter on every unit in the parlor. She weighs every cow's milk. She takes a sample out of every one. Then she writes it all down on a sheet in her own hand. The bottles go to a laboratory. The sheet comes back a couple of weeks later with the numbers on it: pounds, butterfat, protein, and next to every cow, the date she last calved. I called that woman. She is the field supervisor for our district, and she has been doing it 18 years, and she answered on the 3rd ring in her truck. I asked whether the sheets could be changed. She said, "Not by you and not by your mother. We are not on your side, honey. We are not on hers either. We come the same day every month and write down what the cow did that morning. If you do not like it, you still have to eat it." Then she said, "Do you need copies?" And I said yes, and she said they would be in the mail Thursday. That is what was actually in my milk house box, not my opinion of my family. A pile of paper written by a hauler, a veterinarian, a laboratory, a testing supervisor, a bank, and a state office, none of whom have ever been to Christmas at my mother's house. There were 4 more layers, and I will give them to you fast. The tickets say which yard the milk came out of and which number it was credited to. The check statements come once a month with a payee line at the top, and my number is on it. And under those, the certificate the co-op sent me when I bought in at 19 with $4,000 of calf money. It has been in that box ever since, folded in 3 because it was a half-inch too tall to lie flat. And the last layer came from Boise in a brown envelope, and I opened it standing at the mailbox with my glove in my teeth. A certified copy of my mark, the shape of it, printed, the date it went into the book, the one name it went in under. And behind that, every release an inspector has signed on an animal wearing it. Every hip, every yard, going back 17 years. Every one of them said the same name. A stack of paper is not a story. So let me tell you what happened in my grandmother's kitchen 3 weeks in. The night I finally asked her the question I had been walking around all month. I asked Golda why my mother would do it. My grandmother took her glasses off and folded them and put them on the table. She did not answer for long enough that I thought she had not heard me. Then she said, "Because I did it to her first." Marley's milked on this place for 22 years. She started at 13, and she quit at 35. In all 22 of those years, there was not one piece of paper anywhere on this farm with her name on it. Not a lease, not a wage, not a share. My grandmother kept the ground, kept the brand, kept the book, kept the checkbook, and told herself she was keeping it safe. And then Golda watched her granddaughter turn 19. She got in the truck and drove that granddaughter to the courthouse and put the mark in her name. She skipped a generation, and she did not tell the woman standing at the stove. Marley's found out 2 years later at a co-op meeting. A clerk read the producer roll out loud. Her daughter's name was on it, and hers was not. I have carried that around since the day my grandmother said it, and I am going to keep carrying it. It is true. I was standing in the middle of it, and I never once looked. And it does not get her out of one thing. My mother had 15 years after that meeting. 15 years, in the house, with the book open, with a lawyer in Buell 9 miles away who would have written a 2-page partnership agreement for $400 and made all of us safe. She did not spend those 15 years asking for one. She spent them learning which office takes a filing on a Friday afternoon and which sale barn does not read what you hand it. She learned in one afternoon at a co-op meeting exactly how it feels to be the woman nobody wrote down. Then she went and made another one, on purpose, with a typewriter. And the day after my grandmother told me all that, she told me the other thing. She said my mother had come up to the little house before Christmas and sat down. She said that after the dispersal, there would be money. She said the little house was drafty. She said Golda would be more comfortable in town. I asked what she said back. Golda said, I said I would think about it. She is 91. There is not a thing on this earth she is afraid of, except the sentence you have to say to your own daughter. Here is what a herd dispersal does that nobody puts on the green flyer. The milk check is the only thing on this place that comes in every month. It pays the propane. It pays Doc. It pays the feed contract. And on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, it pays the woman who drives out from Wendell to get my grandmother up and fed and walking, $240 a week, every week, for 6 years. Sell the herd, and there is a big number one time. Then there is nothing every month after that. And the first thing that stops, when there is nothing every month, is the thing that was never written down anywhere as an expense. $784,150 for the animals. $1,000 a month for the woman who milked them. $240 a week for the woman who started the whole place and is now 91 years old in the house at the top of the lane. I said earlier that I did not make a scene in my mother's kitchen. That was true right up until the night my grandmother told me about the little house being drafty. That is the night I stopped being sad about it. A brand does not argue. It only answers whose. If you are still with me, hit subscribe. This next part is the part I did not do, and I need somebody to hear the reason. Because a week before that sale, I had a piece of paper in my hand that would have taken my mother's whole life away in one envelope, and I had already addressed it. It was in the co-op letters, and I found it because I was looking for something else. My seat at the co-op, the thing that lets a member ship milk at the good price, had been moved into my sister's name on one sheet of paper. That sheet has 2 lines at the bottom of it. One for the member whose seat is moving. One for the officer who signs underneath to swear the first signature is what it claims to be. Both of them are my mother's. Same pen, same day. She has held that officer's job for 9 years. She carries the ballots to the meetings. She reads the roll out loud. Anybody who has ever sat through a co-op meeting just made a noise. For the rest of you, I called the office in Twin Falls and asked the woman at the membership window what happens to a sheet signed like that. She did not need me to finish the question. She said, Honey, if somebody sets that in front of us with a name on the complaint, she does not just lose the job. Everything of hers that we are holding stops moving until it is done, and it is never done fast. Everything of hers that we are holding. My grandmother told me once, at her own kitchen table, that my mother has never had $1 in her life that did not come through this dairy first. That is not a thing you say about a woman unless you have stood there and watched it. So there it was, 1 page out of my box, 1 page out of hers, a stamp, and a woman at a window in Twin Falls. I typed the letter a week before the sale. I put her name on the envelope and the address on the envelope, and I did not seal it. I put it in the milk house box on top of the yellow carbons. Then I carried that box around for 4 days with the letter in it. I am not going to pretend I did not want to. I wanted to so much that I could taste metal. Here is what I kept coming back to at 4 a.m. with my forehead against a cow. I did not find that sheet because I am clever. The co-op mails those letters to whoever the member is, and the member is me. They have come to my box for 17 years with everybody's trust folded up inside them. The only reason that weapon was in my hand is that people in this valley hand me paper and assume I will not use it on them. That is exactly the assumption my mother spent. My mother signed a consignment for $784,150 once. What was in my hand was smaller than that, and it would have gone on for the rest of her life. One letter takes her bond and her retirement out in the same envelope. I am not going to be my own mother's collection agent. And there was a plainer reason, which is that it would not have moved one animal back into my alley. It would have made a 70-year-old woman poor in a town where everybody would have known why by Sunday, and my cows would still have been on a truck. 3 days before the sale, I took the letter out of the box and put it in the drawer under the parlor sink, unsent. It is still there. I know exactly which drawer. What I did instead took a phone call and a fee and 20 minutes of somebody else's afternoon. I called the brand office in Boise and asked who inspects at the Gooding barn. A woman called me back the next morning from the cab of a truck with a heater going. Her name is Linnea Tilbury, and she is the state brand inspector for this district. She has been reading hips in this valley for 26 years. I had met her exactly once, in a gravel yard, when I was 22 and in a hurry, with 6 cull cows and no paper. She did not remember me. I remembered her. I told her there was a complete dispersal on the 4th, and that the mark on the animals was recorded to me, and the consignor's name on the agreement was not. Linnea Tilbury let me finish. Then she said this, and I wrote it down on the back of a feed tag because I wanted it word for word. "Ma'am, I am not the judge of who owns a herd. That is not my job, and I would be no good at it. My job is that no animal leaves that yard on sale day without me looking at the hip and matching it to a certificate. If the two do not match, I do not sign the release. If I do not sign the release, that animal is not sold. It is that boring." I asked her what she needed from me. She said, "Bring me the certified copy, and be there before 1 o'clock, and do not talk to me in the ring." That is all I did, and none of it was clever. I did not stop that sale. I handed a woman in a canvas coat a piece of paper the state had already written, and then I stood where she told me to stand. She did her job the way she does it on a Tuesday when nobody's family is on fire. 2 days before the sale, the man whose name is on that witness line drove into my yard. Stanley Underhill is the neighbor who has cut our back hayfield since I was in braids. He taught me to back a trailer. He came in and stood in the milk house with his cap in his hands. Then he said it fast, the way men here say a thing they have been rehearsing on the road. I signed her partnership form, Linnea. She asked kindly, and I signed it. I asked him if he read it. He said no. He said Marley's brought it to the shop on the hood of her car and told him it was for the taxes, and that he has signed 100 things on the hood of a car in his life. He did not know it had my cows on the back page until Griselda told him at supper. Then he said the part that took the wind out of me. He said, "I still think you ought to let it go. She is your mother, and she is going to be your mother after all this. And whatever they call it on the paper, Linnea, you milked them. That is not the same." He said it in his own voice, with his cap in his hands, and he did not know where he had gotten it. That is how a sentence like that travels. It goes around a valley on people who mean well until it comes back to you out of the mouth of the man who taught you to back a trailer. I said, "All right, Stanley." And he stood there another minute, and then he left. And I finished the wash cycle, and I did the afternoon milking. I thought that might be the last milking I would ever do in that parlor. It was not. But I did not know that then, and not knowing is the worse of the two. That night, Sylvester pulled the tank at 5:40 with his hat on. He read the stick and wrote the weight. Then, instead of the 6 words he says every time, he stood there with the yellow carbon in his hand and did not hand it over. He said, "What time do you want me there Tuesday?" I said I did not know if there was anything for him to do Tuesday. He said, "I did not ask you that." So he put the ticket under the magnet and went out. I stood in the milk house with the light flickering, and I had about 4 seconds where I was not carrying it by myself. Tuesday, the 4th of March, I got up at 10 minutes of 4 and did the morning milking. Sit with that a second, because it is the whole difference between this life and a job. 214 animals were going on trailers at noon and would be sold to strangers at 1. And at 4 in the morning, every one of them still had to be milked, by me, in order, by name. Or they would have been in pain on the truck. They did not know. That is the part. Balsam came in 4th the way she always comes in 4th. Everly stood on my foot. I finished at 10 of 7, washed up, and went to the house and put on a clean shirt. Then I went out to the truck with 2 things. The milk house box, with everything in it, and the certified copy from Boise on top where I could get it without looking, and my grandmother's iron wrapped in a feed sack on the passenger floor, which I could not have told you the reason for at the time, and can now. Golda was standing at the end of her walk at 8 in the morning, in her coat with her purse over her arm. I told her it was going to be a long day, and there was nothing to see. My grandmother, who is 91, said, "I have been to about 400 of these," and she got in the truck and put her seatbelt on and looked straight ahead, and that was the end of the discussion. The sale barn at Gooding on a dispersal day smells like diesel, wet manure, sawdust, and boiled coffee. If you were raised here, that smell means something is ending for somebody. Cattle trucks were backed in 6 deep. There were maybe 200 people, which is a big crowd for a Tuesday. A complete dispersal is where you buy the kind of cows nobody sells on purpose. By the office door, there is a slate they chalk every morning with the day's offering. Somebody had gone up on a step stool and written it out in a good hand. Complete dispersal. 214 head. Ostergaard. And down in the right corner, small, in the same chalk, the number the barn had put on my herd. $784,150, written on a slate where the count of my cows should have been. There is no line on a slate for $1,000 a month. There is no chalk for 4 o'clock. I stood in front of it with my grandmother holding my arm and my coat unbuttoned, and I did not feel a thing. That happens. Your body decides you have used enough of that up in February, and it just closes the window. Then I went around to the east side, and I looked down the alley. 214 head. A paper tag stapled through every ear tag. They pen them head in on both sides of a walkway, so what you see when you stand at the end of a sale alley is not faces. It is 2 long rows of hips, and every hip in that alley had the same mark on it. I have burned that mark on every spring heifer on this place for 17 years, one at a time, in April, in a corral behind my barn, with my grandmother's iron and my own 2 hands. And I had never once in my life seen all of it in one place. You could stand at the gate and read it going away from you like a fence line. Same shape, same size, same hip, 214 times. That is what a brand is for. It is not for the animal, and it is not for the family. It is so that a stranger, standing at the end of an alley on the worst Tuesday of your life, can see the answer to a question from 40 feet away without asking anybody a thing. My mother was down at the far end with the green ledger under her arm, talking to 2 buyers from Oregon. Griselda Underhill came out of the office with a cup of coffee and put it in my hand and did not say anything and went back in. Doc Thornbury was standing at the rail in her work coat with her chalk in her pocket. She had not been asked to come, and there is no version of that Tuesday in which she had cows to see at that barn. And Sylvester was there in his hat at the far rail with his hands in his pockets, having driven his route 4 hours early to do it. There were others. A woman from the Hagerman side who milks 90 head and has never once spoken to me at a meeting. 2 brothers who bought bred heifers off us in the fall. And the girl who feeds my calves on Saturdays, standing up on the bottom rail in her coat because her mother had taken her out of school to be there. None of them came over. All of them stayed. At 20 of 1, a woman in a canvas coat came down the walkway with a clipboard. Glenna Tilbury walked that alley the way she has walked 10,000 alleys, which is slowly and looking at hips and not at people. She got about a third of the way down and stopped and stood there a while. Then she came back up to the gate and asked me for my paper. I put the milk house box on the tailgate of my own truck and opened it. I took out the certified copy from Boise and put it in her hand. She read it standing up in the cold, with her thumb holding the corner down against the wind. She said, "This is a good copy. Come with me." We went in through the office and up the 3 steps to the auctioneer's stand. On a dispersal day, there are 3 things up there. Up there, it is the auctioneer, the clerk, and a microphone on a stand. I set the milk house box down on the desk. It is olive green, and it is scratched all to hell, and it looked exactly as out of place as you are imagining. Beside it, I laid the feed sack down and folded it open. I left my grandmother's iron lying there next to the microphone, and I did not say one word about it, then or ever, to anybody in that room. I will say it to you, because you are the only one I owe it to. My mother has held that iron. Her hand wore the same bright place in the bar that my hand wears. She stood in that corral in April and burned my grandmother's mark into animals for 22 years. And there is nobody alive who knows better than she does what that mark is and whose question it answers. I did not put it on that desk to prove anything to a room full of buyers. Buyers do not care. I put it there so that the one person in that building who already knew would have to look at it while a stranger read it out loud. My mother came up the steps behind us with the ledger. She looked at the box. She looked at the iron. She looked at me. Then she said it one more time, quietly, the way you remind a child of a rule she keeps forgetting. "You milked them." "That is not the same," I said. "No, it is not." And that is every word I said in that building. Glenna Tilbury asked the auctioneer to hold. "That man has known my mother his whole career. He had a barn full of buyers and a ring crew standing by, and he said fine, and pushed the microphone toward her. A sale barn that argues with a brand inspector does not stay a sale barn. She did not make a speech. She read. She read the mark description. She read the date it was recorded and the name it was recorded to. She read the renewal dates. All of them, 17 years of them, in a flat voice, with a little cough in the middle. And a room with 200 people in it got so quiet you could hear the cattle moving in the alley. Then she put the paper down and said this into the microphone. "The animals in the East Alley carry a recorded mark. The consignor on this agreement is not the recorded owner, and there is no assignment. I am not going to sign a release on any of them today. Nothing in that alley moves off this yard." My mother did not move. She said it into the room and not into the microphone. She said the paper was on file, that it had been on file since last March, and that anybody standing there was welcome to go and read it. And then a woman answered her from the rail, and it was not me, and it was not the inspector. Doc Thornbury never came up the steps. She stayed where she was, with her hands on the top rail and her chalk in her coat pocket. And she said it the way she says everything, flat, the way you read a temperature off a thermometer. Marley's. 3 of the cows on that page were 60 days dry that week. I dried them off myself, and I signed the papers. Then, she said, the other 11 had not calved. They were heifers. Then she said the last of it, and the whole barn got it. There was no herd on that page. There was nothing on it to give away. Somebody at the back said, "Well," and that was all anybody said. A brand does not argue. It only answers whose. The clerk started writing. The ringman went and put the chain across gate 3. 2 men from Oregon put their numbers back in their coat pockets and went to find their driver. They never got to Lot 1. Lot 1 was Everly. They had her in the first pen inside the gate with a paper number stuck on her hip over the top of my mark, and she stood there the whole time with her head out over the rail, looking down the line for somebody carrying a bucket. My mother stood at the top of those steps with the green ledger against her chest and looked at the room looking at her. Then she turned to me and said the thing she has said to me exactly once. It came out with no rapping on it at all. "You let a stranger read our family's business out loud to 200 neighbors." I did not answer her. I have thought about answering her about 400 times since, and there is no sentence that goes there. What happened instead is that my grandmother let go of the rail. Golda Ostergaard went down the 3 steps, out the office door, and across to the end of the East Alley. She put both hands flat on the top rail. Then she put 2 fingers of her right hand in her mouth. The way she taught me when I was 6. She has not been able to make it loud in 20 years. It came out thin and cracked and about half of what it used to be. It was enough. 214 head came up off the concrete and turned and came to the front of their pens. All down that alley, both sides, moving toward a 91-year-old woman in a wool coat. And it made the noise it makes, which is a train going over a bridge. Then Golda took her hands off the rail and said, to nobody in particular, in a room where nobody was talking, "They are not confused about it." The dispersal was scratched off the slate before 3 o'clock. Somebody went up on the step stool with a rag. The barn billed my mother for the yardage, the advertising, and the printing on the green flyers. It came to $940. She paid it at the window, in front of Griselda Underhill. That is the entire financial punishment anybody in this story received. It is smaller than 4 weeks of what my grandmother's help costs. I mailed the co-op everything in my box that showed whose milk had been going out of that yard. The tickets, the statements, the tester's sheets. I did not mail them the sheet with my mother's name on it twice. That one stayed in the drawer under the parlor sink, on top of the letter. I sent the part that put my cows back. I kept the part that would have put my mother out of this valley. If there is one thing in all of this I am proud of, it is a drawer that stayed shut. My seat at the co-op came back to my number in April. My mother gave up the officer's job in May, for health reasons. Everybody accepted that out loud and nobody believed it. That is how a thing gets settled in a valley. Not in a courtroom. At the back of a co-op meeting. By who quits coming. 2 days after the sale, I drove the 9 miles to Buell and paid a lawyer $400. That is the same $400 and the same 9 miles my mother spent 15 years not spending. I sat in a waiting room with a fish tank in it. The whole thing took less than half an hour. I have thought about that waiting room more than I have thought about the sale barn. She sent one letter, with the tester's sheets attached and the 60-day papers behind them. My mother signed the withdrawal 8 days after it landed on her counter. She signed it rather than sit in any room while somebody read out loud when those cows had their first calves. Stanley Underhill drove himself to that same office and swore out a statement that he had never read what he witnessed. Nobody asked him to. He cut our back hayfield in July the way he does. Nobody was arrested. Nobody sued anybody. I never wanted that, and I am not going to pretend at this late hour that I was robbed of a courtroom. And nobody has apologized to me. Not once, not partly, not in a card. I have stopped keeping the chair warm for it. Here is what I did get, and it is not a feeling. In that same office in Buell, I had 4 pages drawn up. A 5-year lease of the ground and the barns at a stated rent, and a bill of sale for the herd, signed by my mother, notarized and dated. By the day she signed the withdrawal, she would have signed almost anything to make the calving dates stop being read out loud. That is the first thing anybody in this family has written down about me in 17 years. A copy of it hangs in the milk house, in a plastic sleeve on the wall over the sink where the tickets go. The wettest room on the place. Anybody who walks in there can read it without asking me a question. Then I did the other thing, and it took longer to decide than the letter I did not send. The mark stays in one name. That is the whole point of the thing, and I was not going to be the one who broke it. What I signed and left on file in Boise is who it goes to after me. One name again. And under it, a line in my own handwriting. She has it for as long as she is the one doing the milking, and on the day she is not, she hands it to whoever is. The next name is the girl who feeds my calves on Saturdays. She is 15, and she is no relation to me at all. And then I made 3 copies. I gave one to her mother in her own kitchen, with the girl standing right there. She read it twice and asked whether it meant she had to keep coming on Saturdays. I said no. She said good, because she was going to anyway. I put the second copy in Golda's drawer, and I put the third in an envelope and mailed it to my mother at the big house. That is the whole difference. My grandmother did the right thing in secret, and the secret cost this family 2 generations. I did the same right thing at the post office. My mother's name is off the producer roll now. It is still on the mailbox at the end of the lane, in white paint, in her own handwriting. She put it there in 1989. I have not painted over it, and I am not going to. She started coming down on Sundays in June. She stands at the parlor rail at 4 o'clock with her coat on, and she does not help, and she does not leave. She has not said one word about February. I have not asked her for one. She has never taken the sentence back either. You milked them. That is not the same. It is a true sentence. It is only not the one that settled anything. We are two women in a parlor with a lot of noise in it. About once a month, she hands me a paper towel for the dip cup. That is what we have got. The green ledger stayed on her counter. I bought my own book at the feed store in Wendell for $6, and I started it in April with the spring calves. The iron hangs on 2 nails on the milk house wall above the box. Every April, it comes down. And on the first Saturday of every month, my grandmother comes down the lane after breakfast. She sits at my kitchen table and gets the good lamp turned around. I put the month's yellow tickets in front of her. She reads the weights out loud, one at a time, while I write them in the book. It takes about an hour. She gets 2 or 3 of them wrong now, and I do not correct her, and she knows I do not, and we have not discussed it. That hour is not a trophy. It comes back around every 4 weeks, whether anybody is watching or not. And at 36, I have finally worked out that this is the part worth having. My mother was right about one thing she said to me in that kitchen, and I think about it more than she would like. Nobody steals what was never in your name. She meant that as a door swinging shut on me. It turned out to be the exact reason a state inspector would not sign a release at Ringgate 3, because the name burned on those animals was mine. And nobody ever got $784,150. That number was chalk. A boy took it off the slate with a rag at 3 in the afternoon, and it took him about 4 seconds. Everly had a heifer calf in June. I wrote her into the new book on the first line of the F year. In April, I will take the iron down off its 2 nails and put my grandmother's mark on her hip. And there will be 5 generations of 1 truckload of calf money standing in my alley at 4 o'clock. A brand does not argue. It only answers whose. That's my story. 214 head. An army surplus box that keeps paper dry in the wettest room on the place. And 1 mark that had my name on it for 17 years, while everybody I love was busy calling it a chore. If you are the one in your family who does the work, here is the 10 minutes I would spend. Go find the piece of paper that says who owns the thing you get up for, not the family story about it, the actual paper, and read the name on it out loud in your own kitchen. You can be done before the coffee is. If you cannot find the paper, that is your answer. And you have time to fix it, and it is cheaper to fix than you think. Share this with the woman who did the work every morning while somebody else kept the book. Then come back and tell me in the comments whose name was on the paper you went and looked at, and hit subscribe. The women this happens to are quiet, and they find each other slowly. That's all of it. Thank you for sitting with me on the porch tonight. I'll see you in the next one.